Learning announcements. Year of Learning sponsored by the Groene and Linsenbaum, Markowitz and Schwartz families, American Mr. Louis Linsenbaum, Hazel Benari, beloved father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. The Year of Learning sponsored by Yulia and Boris Kagan to commemorate the year site of on the father, Yulia's father, Yusuf Ben Mato, and a week of learning sponsored by Mindy and Stuart Rubin, in loving memory of Hilda Aronow, Hulda Basta, Aram Chai, and mother of Mindy and wife of Richard Aronow, whose yard site is on the 17th of Iyar.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. This morning, I'd like to discuss the origins, the halachos, and the application of what we call Shabbos clocks, or Shabbos timers. Actually, their timers could be used for anything, but I would say it was probably in the 1950s, okay, early 1950s, when these became available to the Orthodox Jewish community. And of course, questions were asked, can you use Shabbos clocks? What can you use it for? And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. The basic source to allow Shabbos clocks, and I guess it was a landmark decision by Moshe Feinstein, although he had some restrictions, and we'll talk about it. But it's based on a Gemara that says, Poskim Mayim Lagina, that if you began to irrigate your field on Friday afternoon, you can let the water run all Shabbos long. Once something began before Shabbos, it was allowed to continue on Shabbos. Now, later on, this became more complicated because there were other ideas that were connected to it. For example, if you, the Gemara talks about a wheat grinder. There's a water wheel that would grind wheat. If you started it in motion on Erev Shabbos, can it continue on Shabbos? And there the answer is no, because it makes a lot of noise and it's disruptive and it doesn't serve any Shabbos need per se. You're not going to use the ground wheat on Shabbos. And it's very noisy and it interrupts the spirit of Shabbos. We'll come back to that. But there's another basic machlokas, which we have to understand, which will perhaps help us get some background on this topic. There's a machlokas in the Gemara concerning something called shvisas kelim. You can't work on Shabbos, can't do malacha, your animals cannot do malacha on Shabbos. But what about your objects, your vessels, your mechanical devices, if you will? Is there a halacha of shvisas kelim? Should these things also be quiet on Shabbos? And there you have a machlokas beis Hillel beis Shammai in the Gemara, daf Tes Zayin Amud Beis, regarding shvisas kelim. Beis Shammai holds that shvisas kelim is asur on Shabbos. In other words, you can't, your vessels, your tools, your implements, anything that mechanical also must rest on Shabbos. He's very strict in that regard, whereas Beis Hillel is a little bit more lenient. Again, the connection to Shabbos clocks is very, very clear. Well, maybe not so clear. Can you use a Shabbos clock for things that are not necessary for the enhancement of Shabbos? In other words, you can use a Shabbos clock, turn lights on and off on Shabbos. That's an acceptable use. You can use a Shabbos clock to turn an air conditioner or a system on Shabbos. Things that are, and by the way, and this is based on another Gemara, and a number of tshuvos. If you have a clock, a certain type of a wind-up clock, You obviously can wind it up before Shabbos to let it run on Shabbos, simply because you have to know when to go to shul, you have to know what time it is, anything that enhances Shabbos. But things that don't necessarily enhance Shabbos, and here we get involved in a very gray area known as the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. The spirit of Shabbos versus the halacha of Shabbos. If I have let's say I'm a sports fan, and there's a playoff game, a very important playoff game taking place on Shabbos. Can I set my timer to turn the TV on to watch the game? I'm not doing anything wrong, technically, but is it within the spirit of Shabbos to watch a hockey, football, baseball, basketball game on Shabbos? That's true also, but the question is watching that game on Shabbos, whether you were engaged in turning it on or not, is that the appropriate activity for a Shabbos? Which goes back to the discussion we had a few weeks ago concerning the use of the Eruv on Shabbos. Is it appropriate to use the Eruv to have baseball games, basketball games?
Definitely not.
Okay, but again, there's a letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. The letter of the law might say, technically, you're not violating any halachos, but the spirit of Shabbos is being violated because that's not what Shabbos is for. And that goes through, and that's the machlokes, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, in terms of shvisas kelim, and how the halakha is possible. And the Rishonim is a machlokes Rishonim, actually. Shulchan Aruch and other Rishonim debate this topic, whether or not shvisas kelim is asur on Shabbos or not. The wheat grinder was prohibited not because the malacha itself was prohibited. You started this process before Shabbos, just like irrigating your field before Shabbos. But irrigating your field on Shabbos is quiet. The water just flows. A wheat grinder makes a lot of noise. So, for example, and I'm not paskening a halacha, ask your local Orthodox rabbi, can you use a timer for your dishwasher on Shabbos? Now, there are many people who don't wash dishes on Shabbos because of problems with hot water and so forth. Very complicated sugya. But when you turn the clock turns on the dishwasher, you're not doing any prohibited malacha necessarily. But it's not always quiet. Dishwasher makes a lot of noise. And that's analogous to this wheat grinder in the Gemara. So is that the appropriate use of a timer on Shabbos when the noise, again, there are some women who can't stand to have dirty dishes in the sink on Shabbos afternoon. I understand that. And that ruins their sense of Shabbos. Okay?
Right.
So you can rinse the dishes, you can wash the dishes, but putting it in a dishwasher, it makes a lot of noise, and that may or may not be disruptive to a person's Shabbos nap or a person just sitting around and there's noise in the background. So again, I'm not postulating a halakha. The Rishonim are on both sides of this issue, going back to the machlokes of shvisas kelim. Those who are matir use the example of the irrigation, the wall clocks, and so forth. And also, the clocks don't disturb the Shabbos atmosphere. You have to know what time it is, go to shul and so forth. And whereas grinding flour or washing dishes is not necessarily a Shabbos need. There's no need to wash those dishes. Now, a lot of people, because of that, use these very fancy paper plates. They're very beautiful. You go to Amazing Savings, they have a whole section of fancy paper plates. You almost feel like washing those paper plates sometimes. They're very, very nice. The people do that and they just throw it out. And that solves the problem of washing dishes on Shabbos afternoon. For many people that want to do that. There's an interesting tshuva, interestingly enough, by Avadia Yosef, the former chief Sephardi rabbi. In general, by the way, when it comes to shilas regarding the IDF, the rabbis tend to be lenient as much as possible because of what the IDF is doing to protect Israel. So many soldiers, religious soldiers, are given off on Shabbos to go home. And most of the time that means taking the last bus to get home just before Shabbos and taking the first bus to leave after Shabbos is over to get back to their army base or wherever they might be serving. Most soldiers, when they come home, take the advantage of the opportunity to wash their uniforms. This is a well-known practice. But if you're getting home right before Shabbos and you're throwing your uniforms into the washing machine, it's going to run on Shabbos. Are you allowed to do that? And he says, yes, it's permitted to do this, even according to those who hold Shvisas Kalim is Osir, because the Ramah paskins that where there is a tzorech gadol, if there is a great need, if there's an overriding need, then it would be permissible.
That would mean that if I just decide right before Shabbat I want to wash something.
No, not for you. Not for you.
Not, right.
Not for you, because it's not a need for you, because you'll be home Motzei Shabbos.
Right.
But for Israeli soldiers who have to come home and rush out again, they need clean uniforms. And so he issued a psak that was very lenient. Now,
So anything related to sakana would be allowable.
well, this is not really sakana, but it's helping those who, I guess, prevent sakana. Again, normally when it comes to Piska Halacha regarding the IDF, the rabbis tend to be lenient because of the service that they're performing to protect Israel. In this case, it's not a question of sakana, but it could be considered tzorech gadol, which the Ramah says you can do. Now, let's talk about those sporting events. It's interesting that the TV is quiet, but is the sporting event within the atmosphere of Shabbos. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked an interesting question by his grandson. And he says, can I take uncooked food and set a timer to turn on the oven an hour before lunch on Shabbos afternoon, so we'd have a hot meal for Shabbos lunch? We're not talking about leaving the sholn pot on all day, and leaving something on the blech. I want to have a fresh, hot cooked meal. I have raw food. I put it in the oven. I set the timer. You're putting it in the oven Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos. I mean, again, yeah, they're taking it out of the refrigerator. It involves other questions, but here, the basic question is: can I turn on the timer on Shabbos to cook a meal that I didn't do anything on Shabbos? I did it all before Shabbos. Can I use the timer for that purpose? And he said, in my humble opinion, even though you can use automatic devices to do certain things on Shabbos, in this case, he says, it's usur. You cannot do that. Why? Because if you're allowed to do that, then every factory, every store, people can do all types of things on Shabbos that are inappropriate for Shabbos. So he paskin, you may not do it. And clearly, it's the same prohibition of allowing, for example, a non-Jew to do malacha for you on Shabbos. It's in the same category. And he goes even further. And this is the landmark nature of this tshuva, which is very important. And Rav Aaron Lichtenstein echoed this in strong terms as well. A Shabbos timer can only be used for something that enhances Shabbos. There's an age-old tradition of having, the Shabbos guy turn lights off and on before you had electricity, or before you had, gas lights or whatever. The notion of a Shabbos guy is well entrenched. Although it's interesting how there's a whole book written called the Shabbos guy, about the history of it, and it's rather murky to allow it in the first place, but that's a separate discussion. But in any event, since we do have this concept, if the use of the timer threatens the integrity of what Shabbos is all about, then he says you shouldn't be using it. In other words, the spirit.
Who is the
Question?
he? Who is the he again? Which Rav?
This is from Moshe Feinstein.
Thank you.
Moshe Feinstein in, I want to look it up. It's in, where is it? It's in Igros Moshe Orachaim, Chelik Dalid, number 60.
Question.
Yes.
The same question, if this food had been cooked already, so you're not taking it from raw, you're taking it as a cooked piece of meat.
Correct.
What's the story there?
It would be the same thing, because that gets into another technical machlokas of shehiyah and chazara. It's a big machlokas in terms of warming food up on Shabbos, how you may or may not do it. But turning on a timer specifically, for example, a lot of people use a hot plate on Shabbos.
Or an urn, let's say.
Okay, but the urn is on all the time.
No, but let's say you have an urn on a timer, that's a problem.
Yeah, that would be a problem. It's the same, for example, if you use a hot plate, and you don't want to leave the hot plate on all night long, so you have a timer, you turn it off and turn it on. Can you do that on Shabbos? So, in my humble opinion, I would say no. Now, there are others who might disagree with me, and if you seek guidance, consult your local rabbi. But it's based on the same concept. You can't have something or somebody do something for you that you can't do yourself.
How about just turning the hot plate off? In other words, you want the hot plate for Friday night, and then you don't need it for Shabbos, and you're concerned about safety, so you just have the hot plate getting turned off.
So if you have it on a timer to turn it off, that will be less of a problem. That will be less of a problem to turn it off. The sakana involved, leaving it on all night long, nothing on. Now that would probably be less of a problem. But turning it back on again, in my mind, would be a problem.
Well,
And certainly, yeah, Nathan, yes.
there's a lot, the blick uses a lot of electricity. It's very expensive. Would that be a mitigating circumstance?
No. If you have an electric blach, or if it's on, you got to leave it on. The same way you have your gas. For those that still have gas stoves, the gas is left on a low flame all Shabbos long, or kedera blach, whatever type of blach that you use. Once it's on, you have to leave it on. You can't turn it off, even if there's nothing on the blach. You finish your lunch, there's nothing left there. Again, if you have a timer, for example, you have a crock pot that your cholent is in, and the crock pot remains on for 18 hours. And it goes off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon after you finish lunch. That's less of a problem. That's less of a problem. But turning it back on again, would be problematic. Yeah. A yachid and there are differences, yes, but here it would be the same. Again, it goes back to the machlokas Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, whether or not there's a halacha of shvisas kelim on Shabbos. And if we normally paskin like Beis Hillel, but many Rishonim, there's a machlokas and Tosfos, Rabbeinu Tam and the Balei Tosfos disagree in terms of shvisas kelim, but there's a large preponderance of poskim who would say that these type of things would be prohibited on Shabbos. It's in terms of the technicality of the halakha. You have a halakha called kibui. Kibui means extinguishing a flame. Just same way that you can't light a flame on Shabbos, one of the avos malachos is extinguishing a flame on Shabbos. So turning something off, even indirectly, could be very problematic. No. Again, if it's a question of sakana, then all bets are off. It's a question of comfort. there are heterim you can utilize on Yontif, but not necessarily on Shabbos. For example, if it's very, very hot in the shul on Shabbos, you get a heat wave. It would be problematic to tell a non-Jewish custodian to turn the air conditioning on Shabbos. On Yontif, it might be permissible. I remember, I think I may have told you this story. A friend of mine, his grandfather lived with him, and he had an aide. And on Shabbos afternoon, it was getting dark, and he wanted to read, but he couldn't. It was dark, so he said, "You know, it would be very nice if somebody would just turn the lights on." The guy got the message, but the way he said it, he didn't tell him to do it. He just, it would be very nice if somebody would turn the lights on. So again, there are differences between Shabbos and Yontif. It's a whole different ballgame. But clearly, the main point, the main thrust of Rav Moshe's tshuva in answering his grandson's question is that Shabbos has specific value in terms of the atmosphere that you're creating on Shabbos. And anything that is not within the, I guess, the spirit of Shabbos is somewhat problematic. Now,
Rabbi,
again, yes.
just a question of clarification. I don't mean to, insult you or question you or anything. I just want for clarification. I believe you said that using a timer to go on to a hot tray on Shabbos so that you could have a hot lunch, in your opinion, should not be done. But then I believe you said that Rav Moshe Feinstein said a Shabbos timer can only be used for things that enhance Shabbos. So isn't, for an individual, a warm Shabbos lunch would enhance his Shabbos? So I just want to
Okay, good. All right, so let me clarify. A warm Shabbos meal does enhance Shabbos, which is why we have blechs, which is why we have cholent, which is why we have all these things that are kept warm all Shabbos long. What you cannot do is initiate the cooking process on Shabbos, whether it's directly or indirectly. So turning on the Shabbos clock it may be indirect, but it would still violate the halacha of Shabbos in terms of turning on the electricity or the gas or what have you. Huh? Well, right, but in order to warm it, you have to turn something on. No, the question is, if a timer turns on a hot plate or the gas to warm it up for you. Again, to try to clarify, you can't set a timer to go on Shabbos to warm something up or to cook something. It's a timer can be set to turn it off, but not necessarily to turn it on, even though it's already been cooked. Because the cooking and the turning on are two separate things. You're not violating the Isur of Bishul, but you're violating the problem of turning something on, even though it's indirect. Again, I would consult your local authority about that, because there are some people who are more lenient than others concerning hot plates going off and on Shabbos. I know when we go to a friend of ours for lunch, so her rabbi says that you can do it. But she knows when I come for lunch, she leaves it on all Shabbos long. So I would consult with your local rabbi, but the clear implication,
Wally,
yes.
what's the name of her rabbi?
I will tell you that offline.
Okay.
The implication of Rav Moshe's tshuva, echoed by Rav Lichtenstein, is that clearly the ruach of Shabbos, the attitude that we take towards what is appropriate for a Shabbos activity is very, very important. So therefore, given that, now again, if there's a great need, for example, when Israel became a state, many kibbutzim were religious kibbutzim, and they had dairy farms. Well, cows have to be milked every day. And if you don't milk a cow on Shabbos, it's tsar balei chaim, it's painful. And the Chazon Ish, one of the most right-wing of all poskim, allowed them to use milking machines automatically set to a timer on Shabbos to milk these cows. Otherwise, and they could use the milk. Some religious kibbutzim don't use the milk, but in any event, he allowed these automatic milking machines on Shabbos because there was a great need. Sorach Gadol it was painful, and there were other things. Television programs, sporting events are not really within the orbit of Ruach Shabbos. However, for example, let's say you are at a business conference and your parnasa is involved, and the conference runs over Shabbos. And obviously, you're not going to participate in the conference on Shabbos. However, some of the presentations, which are very important to your business, are being Zoomed. Can you set your TV on a timer to watch that business presentation on Shabbos? And there are some poskim who would say yes, because it's a question of your parnasa. The same thing would be true, for example, for a student on a Shabbos or a Yontif missing a very important class or lecture that he needs for a degree or an exam or something. So again, how you determine tzorach gadol, great need or financial loss, would also filter into this psak. But things that are a threat to the integrity of Shabbos, generally poskim would be opposed to. Again, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. The letter of the law might let you watch a playoff game, but the spirit of the law would militate against it. And I think that's a very, very important thing. There's another thing that one of the poskim raises. It's interesting. It's a footnote, actually. When you're watching, and I'm not a sports fan, so I can't validate this, but maybe those of you who are can. Very often the commercials on some of these sporting events are not the most appropriate when it comes to tznius and other things of that sort. And that also filters into the whole ruach of Shabbos and in general, general hashkafa. So we have to also consider the fact this is why many rabbanim are opposed to having a TV in your house altogether, what kind of solves the problem of Shabbos clocks on television. But clearly, what goes through all of this discussion, and not just in terms of Shabbos, but in general, in halacha, you have technicalities in terms of the letter of the law, but very often poskim introduce the spirit of the law in terms of making a psak halacha, because sometimes the spirit of the law really becomes the letter of the law. Because what's the purpose of Shabbos? The purpose of Shabbos is menucha, granted, so you take your nap, but it also gives you a time to spend with your family, to go for a walk, appreciate nature, sit and learn, an extra time to go to a shiur. That's what Shabbos is for. Not necessarily to play ball or suit up for a basketball game or whatever. That's not what Shabbos is for. The Shabbos timers are a tremendous boon to Shmira Shabbos, but it's used to help enhance Shabbos. So if it means turning on lights, turning on air conditioners, or turning on a heating system in the winter, turning off a hot plate later on in the afternoon, or a cholent pot or a crock pot, it's on a timer. These are important areas, and the most, I made the observation before that one of the issues of Shabbos and Yom Tov in general is that the physicists who understand how electricity works don't have a real good grounding in halacha. And the poskim who decide the halacha don't always have the best grounding in the laws of physics and electricity. And that's why we have some of these gray areas in between. But the Shabbos timers are definitely a boon. I mean, we call it a Shabbos timer. It's not really a Shabbos timer. It could be used for other things as well. But in the frum world, we call it a Shabbos clock. But it's not really a Shabbos clock because when you go to the store to buy it, it's called a timer.
Wally?
So, yes, question there?
Yeah, Wally,
Yes.
can you discuss the inyan of microphones in shuls that are turned on before Shabbos and using them on Shabbos?
Okay, so microphones in shuls are a different question altogether. It's irrelevant if it's turned on or off, because the physics of the voice enhancement of the microphone involved certain transmission and changes in the current, and it's basically turning a switch, not necessarily off and on, but higher and lower. The chief rabbinate invented, together with the Tzomet Institute in Israel, a certain type of a carbon-based microphone where the electric current is not modulated the same way as a normal microphone. And they did this for use on Navy ships of the Israeli Navy to minimize Chillul Shabbos. They needed to have a sound system. And I think that there are one or two shuls. There was one in Baltimore, as a matter of fact. There was a Rabbi Miller many, many years ago had in Baltimore. And there was one shul out in the Hamptons that uses this carbon microphone, which is very, very controversial because it wasn't meant to be used in a shul. But a regular microphone, the physics of voice modulation involves Chillul Shabbos, and that's why even though it was turned on before Shabbos, it would still be problematic in terms of violating Hilchos Shabbos. So that would be a separate issue in the physics of how microphones work. You can probably Google it at the Tzomet Institute to learn more about this carbon-based microphone that was meant for the Navy, but a few places have adopted it to try to minimize Chillul Shabbos where they felt it was necessary. But in most Orthodox shuls, I don't think you would find microphones. Yes, Dan?
Some shuls, I'm talking about like 70, 80 years ago, that did allow microphones. They've generally not been accepted today.
Yeah, but as I said, because the people writing these chuvos, either they don't understand physics or they don't understand halacha, somewhere in between. So again, modern technology presents tremendous challenges to the halacha, and you have a few rabbanim who are quite knowledgeable. There are two institutes in Israel for science and technology. There's Tzomet, and there's another one that work on these issues. For example, the invention of the Shabbos mode wheelchair through the groma switch, which when you turn it on, it doesn't activate the circuit. It's delayed, so it's an indirect action, which is less of a problem on Shabbos than just turning on a switch. So there are technologies that people are working on to avoid Chillul Shabbos. But again, the important consideration is, does it enhance Shabbos? If an electric wheelchair allows somebody to go to shul on Shabbos while minimizing Chillul Shabbos, that would be a positive thing. Shabbos mode on a stove, again, it's also through a groma switch. It's an indirect action. When you're turning something on, it doesn't go on automatically. There's like a delayed, it goes through several steps. So when you turn the switch on, nothing is happening. And then at some few seconds later, an automatic switch flips on and closes the circuit. But by you doing it, it's like a delayed action type of thing. So there's no direct action.
But I thought Shabbos mode on, you can't use that oven on Shabbos day. Can't put anything in at the closed up Shabbos. I
Correct.
thought,
The Shabbos mode is really Yontif mode.
right,
They call it Shabbos mode.
right. Or to enable on the early Shabbos to keep your food warm till,
Right, yeah. I mean, you can't really, it's a misnomer. It should be called Yontif mode as opposed to Shabbos mode, because there are differences in what you can do with electricity on Shabbos and on Yontif. But what we call Shabbos mode is really Yontif mode. But because you're setting it before Shabbos, and then you're just letting it go. You're not doing anything.
One of the main things of the Shabbos though is that it shouldn't shut itself off.
Right. It shouldn't go in. Right, because you want to leave it on all Shabbos long, so it doesn't close the circuit and allows to remain on all Shabbos long. And that's through the group in Baltimore, I think it gives a hechsher on it. Okay, any other questions? Okay, enjoy your Shabbos.
thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Take care,
You
Wally.
too, Wally. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank you,
all.
Wally.
Take care.
Good day, everybody.
Right.
When the neighbors shut the microphone, it's a module, like it doesn't change.
Yeah, but using a regular microphone, it has a lot of problems, sure.
Rabbi, can I get this for you?
Yes.
So,
Thank you very much.
and continue to feel better.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a Zimun?
Yeah.
On the sign of Arech. Shem Arach Mitav Yad Allah, Shus Kol B'Suvin Kan, Varech Shechal Mishalov. Aruch Shechal Mishalov, Tivach Hayinu, Rochaton Merch Lamazar Yasson Kol B'Suvin. Uvtuvo Hagadol, Tomid Lochos, Samayim Lashmo Gadol. Ki hu yazon afnes lakol mitiv lakol mechim mazon lakol b'yasav Hashem bara v'rochato Adonai yazon esakol. V'yakol. V'rochato Adonai al ha'oret v'al ha'mazon. Uvenei Yerushalayim Mirakodesh Meiravi Yameinu V'rochato Adonai b'nei berachamav Yerushalayim. Amen. Uheiti v'umeidin Revachat Zola v'yatzlacha bracha Yeshua nechem v'hanasach Chaim shalachotov U'mikatuv Yolamai chasreinu. See you later.
Right, the chair is more reliable than the table.
Yeah. The hardest part is getting up.
Yeah. Rear door, okay, I'm right by the rear door.
Oh, yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should be on Celsius.